Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandeep Kashyap. I'm a Principal Control Tower Specialist. With me, I have Joe McDermott, Director Cloud Security at CyberArk. I've been working with customers for a little over 4 years now at Amazon Web Services, helping them build their governance and migration practices on the cloud. Today, with Joe, I'd be talking to you about what it takes to build a strong foundation for customers who are looking to migrate. And we'll talk about what are the different solutions that are available in AWS Marketplace that customers can use. And then we'll go deep into what CyberArk is all about, their products, features, and wind it up with a case study that on how one large financial services customer leveraged both Control Tower and CyberArk solutions to successfully migrate to the cloud. The day after Thanksgiving on 2015, I took a really long road trip from Seattle to Minnesota, right? In my Honda Civic, we packed our stuff, and a lot of it came in the truck as well. But that was a very interesting journey across 3 days when we moved to Minnesota, right? As we reached there, we stayed in a rented place to begin with. We waited for our luggage and had to possibly buy some stuff also to cover the initial couple of weeks. That was a typical migration journey for me, so to say. And 4 years later, I returned to Seattle in a totally new setup, working at Amazon, looking at different types of places to stay. I think of the journey for customers from different terrains, such as on-prem or different clouds onto AWS as a similar experience that I undertook, right? For me, it's all about building a strong foundation for a house where my family can safely stay, right? And that's what a customer would also look for when they're building the when they're building their environments on the cloud. Once you have a strong foundation, you want a strong architecture that supports the different needs. In my case, I can never think about putting a teenager and a soon-to-be teenager in the same room. They're going to fight the hell out of it. And I really don't want that to happen. So I need more rooms. I need rooms where, which we can use for entertainment, exercise, and different purposes. That's very much how customers also think like. And once we have a house that is ready to move in, that we would love to live in, then we need our appliances, because no family is going to come and live in an empty house. We want them to have all the appliances where they can cook their food, have the internet, because to get your entertainment, communication in place, and most importantly, security and the keys to your house, so that you make sure that nobody has access other than your own family. And I think that is very typical of how customers also like to build their journey on the cloud and move their workloads to the cloud, right? That's where a service like AWS Control Tower helps you build a landing zone that gives you a strong governance and governance framework on which customers can host their workloads. The landing zone provision by AWS Control Tower consists of 3 AWS accounts. One is a management account, which hosts your account factory. It also sets up your AWS organizations, which create a set of core organization units and a custom organization unit in which new accounts are created. In the management account, you also have your AWS SSO setup, which acts as your identity provider and creates break class users for all the accounts that are being created in Control Tower, right? The additional accounts that get created is a log archive account, which hosts all your config and CloudTrail logs in a 3 bucket that is protected by service control policies. And finally, you have your audit account that acts as your security account and hosts your config aggregator and provides an account baseline for all AWS accounts that are created. With this foundation, customers can now build many other accounts. The other things that you get out of the box with Control Tower is a set of 80+ guardrails that give you a comprehensive security posture in the cloud, right? You have a dashboard which gives you accurate status on any violations that take place in your AWS account. You have built-in identity and access management, which you can integrate with third-party identity providers like CyberArk to make sure you have consistent and comprehensive identity management. And finally, you have built-in monitoring and notifications for which you do not have to set up any additional bootstrapping or configuration to get your notifications in case of any violations. Now, once your landing zone is set up, customers then adopt a multi-account architecture so that, like I said, I don't want my team stepping over each other and fighting. Customers don't want different teams stepping over each other's workloads and having any problems between each other. So that's where customers create a multi-account environment and create more accounts to host different teams, personas, and workloads. What we recommend to customers is to create foundational OUs where they would host their security and networking infrastructure related workloads so that there is limited footfall and traffic in those accounts. And then they can create additional accounts that align with the needs and demands of different personas and different teams. Typically, customers isolate accounts where they have production workloads, and they would have sandbox accounts where they would give broader flexibility to engineers and developers to test out their applications before they deploy them on production accounts. Now, after we gave out this multi-account architecture and this landing zone, customers told us that this is not sufficient. They did want multiple other use cases to build into these newly created AWS accounts. And these use cases were around cloud operations to have greater visibility and control in these accounts. Right? They want to automate the operations and not have to go into each and every account to plumb new functionality from third-party providers or native services. They want to make sure that as they host critical workloads, they are compliant with all types of regulatory requirements, and they have it done from a central place. Right? And finally, they want to make sure that their security and network operations are centralized so that they can control the encryption and any kind of added security they want to implement in their networking. So the broad areas that customers really wanted more flexibility and options were around cloud operations, security operations, and network operations. We worked with the partners in AWS Marketplace to build a set of solutions that delivered towards each of these use cases. It involved multi-account security, identity, networking, observability, and log management, and cost management. These set of solutions provide customers a set of comprehensive use cases that they can deploy into their AWS environment. You can check these out under Solutions for Control Tower in AWS Marketplace. Typically, the way such an integrated solution would look like is you use Control Tower to build your landing zone, and as you create new AWS accounts, you hook up these accounts with solutions from Marketplace. In today's talk, we're talking about how CyberArk integrates with AWS Control Tower and provides a comprehensive security posture for customers who are creating a lot of accounts and using CyberArk to manage their identity. With that, I'll pass it over to Joe to take us through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Sandeep. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Joe McDermott. I'm Director of Cloud Security here at CyberArk. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the AWS partnership that we have today. It's really, really strong, and it's really helped us deliver for our customers and also for us as an internal customer of AWS. We're on the AWS Marketplace. We have advanced technology partnerships. We're competency in security and digital workplace and service ready in AWS outputs. So a little bit of background for you guys who might not be familiar with CyberArk. Who are we? What are we doing up here today, right? We're a company that's been around since 1999. We've been laser focused at the beginning of our journey on managing and securing admin credentials throughout your environment. So when we talk about your environment, going back 10 years, 15 years, it was primarily on-premise, right? It was securing and managing root accounts, local admin accounts, service accounts, whatever you can think of, we could vault it, rotate it on a regular basis, and provision access to it. As our customers started moving to the cloud and to AWS, we started evolving as well. Traditionally, as I said, we were an on-premise solution. We've now deployed and developed a lot of SaaS solutions that our customers are leveraging in order to secure their cloud environment and their AWS environment. Two of those we're going to talk about today: Privileged Cloud and Cloud Entitlements Manager. So our overall vision has also expanded from just privileged accounts to all identity security, right? As privilege has expanded in the cloud, more and more people have access, more and more people need to be secured. So we have everything from multi-factor enablement, lifecycle management, single sign-on, all the way to rotating and vaulting credentials and non-human users and secrets management. The end goal is to have our identity security platform enable and secure all identities accessing sensitive data, DevOps pipelines, services, and any other data across your on-premise or AWS environment. So let's take a little bit of a dive into our case study, right, for our joint financial customer that we worked with AWS on. This is a customer that reached out to us about a year ago in March of 2021, and they were beginning their migration from on-premise into AWS. At the time, they had about 10 accounts spun up. They were rapidly growing. They have about 13,000 employees, but they're big into acquisition and mergers. So they've added more and more environments to their account over time. They grew about 4 times through those M&A activities. Their general environment is what you can imagine. They had about 4 on-premise data centers that they consolidated down to 1, and then everything else was moved over to AWS. They were using VMware and Citrix for virtualization, and they had a mix of Windows and Linux OSs. Currently, they have over 50 developers working on AWS and 140 engineers supporting it. So they have a pretty big team. And they're leveraging multiple AWS services, as we've already talked about. So certainly Control Tower, but EC2, Lambda, RDS, Secrets Management, you name it, this customer is leveraging it. Business drivers for why they wanted to move to the cloud: cost savings, right? Optimization, digital transformation initiatives, all the things that we hear time and time again from our customer base. They did run into some challenges, though, and they wanted to build out a strong identity and access management program. So they're a highly regulated industry. They know they have to have their checks and balances in place. So they needed more additional features to help augment their AWS deployment. So where did they start? Well, they started with the basics, right? These guys are a great customer, and AWS provides a lot of great best practices where they can start and they can build out their program from. So they use Control Tower to set up those landing zones and those accounts with the guardrails and baseline security. And then they started building from there. And they said, look, we want to make sure that we're implementing least privilege, we're enabling multi-factor on a lot of accounts, we're managing and securing root. All the things that Amazon teaches us, we want to make sure that we're doing. We want to make sure we're doing it with the native services, but also bringing in additional partners to help. So what were some of the big pain points that they faced, right? They had those 140 engineers, as I mentioned, across 25 organizational units with multiple teams in each OU. So if you think about it, there's all these different groups who have different missions, right? They're trying to secure their environment. They're trying to make sure that they get their data center migrated on time and in the right security format. And it becomes tough to manage from a centralized location, right? Everybody has different needs and permission sets. How do you take a step back, implement consistent least privilege across the entire platform, and make sure everybody has the right set of rules in place? That was one of their big challenges. They had applications that they were transitioning from on-premise to AWS, about 150 of them. Now, some of this was lift and shift. Some of this was rebuild. But when you're shifting applications, you want to make sure that nothing breaks, right? These are your money makers, especially if they're customer facing. You want to make sure it's done securely and correctly from the beginning. They also wanted to make sure they had the right tools in place to secure access to their sandbox and production environments, right? So they wanted to make sure that the people that needed access got the access, but just the right amount. And they didn't want to maintain and build core services, right? That's one of the key benefits of the cloud, is that's there for you. So what was the approach? We kind of talked about it already. They were going to leverage the native AWS solutions that they had in place, right? And then they were going to layer on third-party solutions to fill in any gaps or make any enhancements. So we already talked about it, and Sandeep covered the automated AWS account creation with Control Tower. So this was a compliant baseline out of the box with a strong security posture. It's a great place to start from. We wanted to make sure that we provided secure and scalable access to the resources using their identity provider and AWS SO. And then we wanted to go ahead and layer on top of that privileged access management, which has been CyberArk's bread and butter for a long time, and then cloud entitlements management, making sure that that least privilege is implemented across the board. So how did we do this? We already talked about this with Control Tower a little bit, and Sandeep touched on it, but we We really wanted to make sure that as they were using Control Tower to set up these accounts and to set up their AWS SSO, they were leveraging the integration with CyberArk. So CyberArk Identity has an integration with AWS SSO so that once Control Tower creates that account and it's provisioned, the user in CyberArk Identity automatically has access. And then we can also make sure that the right policies and checks and balances are put in place with that integration. So really strong integration that they were able to leverage. If we take that down a little bit deeper, we can go a layer deeper and talk about Cloud Entitlements Manager and Privileged Access Manager and how they added value. So CEM, or Cloud Entitlements Manager, went in and looked at the IAM permissions that existed in their account, and they were able to see what was excessive and then right-size those permissions. From the privileged access piece, there's still some standing accounts that you still need to manage within any AWS environment, like local admin or root service accounts. If they're not ephemeral and they're going to be there a long time, best practices is to make sure we're discovering those and rotating those credentials on a regular basis. And we were able to do that with our traditional privileged access manager or PrivCloud. So let's dive into Cloud Entitlements Management a little bit further, because I think it added a lot of value to our customer here. The first thing that I hear from my customer base when they're talking about entitlements in the cloud is visibility. Traditionally, there's a lot of different identities and entities that are set up in the cloud, and organizations, especially the IDAM teams, just don't know who has access to what. It becomes difficult and a challenge for them to manage. So the first thing that CEM does, or Cloud Entitlements Manager does, is take a step back and take a look at who has access. It's going to look into your CloudTrail. So first off, CEM is a SaaS solution running on AWS, and it connects to your CloudTrail and looks at the activity over the past 90 days. Using that past 90 days as a baseline, it can come up with an idea of who's using what permissions. So for instance, if I am an IAM user for Joe, I have 100 permissions assigned to me. Maybe I'm only using 25 of them on that regular basis. Those other 75 may be over-permissive and could potentially be trimmed off. So we give that visibility first. The other thing we do when we're doing our analysis is we look at the used and unused permissions, but then we also look at the level of access they have to the different resources. So does this have read access to EC2 or write access to S3? That gets taken into consideration. The third thing that we look at, and that I think is super important, is this idea of exceptional factors. So we take a look and say, okay, if we're looking at this account, number one is multi-factor enabled. It's an AWS best practice. If it's not, we'll increase our risk score based on that. We'll look into Privileged Cloud and say, is this account vaulted and managed within CyberArk? If it isn't, it'll increase its risk score. If it is, it'll decrease it. And then finally, in the area that I think is probably the most interesting and from a security standpoint, is this concept of shadow admins, right? So within AWS, you have permissions that are absolutely needed, whether it's PAS role or assume role. Certain scenarios where those permissions are needed and critical to your business. Some scenarios, though, where users have those and really shouldn't. So we call that a shadow admin, and we want to detect on that. The reasons that those permissions can be risky is they can either assign themselves additional permissions or assign them and create a backdoor to another account potentially. So we take that all into consideration. We come up with a risk score, 0 to 100, and we have a demo later where you'll see it. And based on that risk score, we actually give you a new policy that you can then implement to remediate that excessive access. And it's a JSON that CEM will actually create for you. You can then either manually apply it into AWS or use something like APIs or Terraform to do it programmatically. When we talk about privileged access management and the value that PrivCloud provided, again, we talked about it at the beginning, but it's really making sure that we're vaulting and rotating those key credentials within the AWS environment. So PrivCloud is a SaaS solution that has a connector that you would deploy within your AWS environment, and it would allow you to discover credentials, automatically rotate them on a regular basis, and then we control the access to who has access to those credentials. So if you think about it, I'm a user, I need to get to an EC2 instance at root level access. Probably a specific reason for that, but we just don't want to give that user that type of access. So what we would do is vault that credential. They'd use CyberArk Identity to multi-factor into the vault. And then from there, we'd provision access to the target system with that elevated access. We'd actually do it through a jump server or privileged session manager because we don't want to reveal the credential to the end user if we don't need to. And then that also gives us the capability to monitor and record that actual activity. So then once that end user has completed that session, they've done what they need to do, they log out, the session's terminated. On the back end, you can set a policy to have CyberArk rotate that credential. So even though they didn't see it, you can take that extra step and make sure it's rotated. So I do want to get into the demo a little bit here of Cloud Entitlements Manager. It might go quick because it's embedded, so I don't have the ability to pause, so I will try to make sure that I talk fast. But before I even start, what we're looking at here is the landing zone. or not the landing zone, sorry, the radar, so the landing page when you log in. Now these big circles, you're probably wondering what those are. Those represent AWS accounts. So the different size accounts, the bubbles are bigger based on the size of the account, right? So this is one with more entities in it than the others. And then there's shading on the accounts too, and the bubbles based on the risk score. So darker shade of orange or red, riskier environment, lighter shade, maybe yellow, less risky. So you can see here at the top, there's a exposure score. We have a 39%, and you can actually even see the entities too, right? So we see that there's 235 entities, about 202 roles, 28 groups, and 15 users in that environment. We give our top recommendations, which, as you see, a lot of it is secure with multi-factor and vault those credentials. And then we also give you the ability to look at exposure over time, so you can track your progress to see how much you're reducing risk in your environment. So if we click into the actual AWS account here, we'll be able to look and see the information that it provides and the value. So here you have a list. It's going to list out all the different entities, the users, the groups, and the roles. You can filter depending on what you want to see. But it lists that out for you. And then you'll also be able to see the workspace or the cloud account that it's tied to. And then also the entity name. So you can see over here we have all the different entity names. And then those little icons next to it are if it's an admin or a shadow admin. If you click in, this is a role. What we're showing here is an access map. So you can see the blast radius of what this account actually has access to, both on a used and unused permission standpoint. So you can see the different services and resources that it has access to, like Glue and different ones here. You can also filter too, just check to see if they're unused permissions. You can filter down so you can see what's risky, and then you can hide it too and look at just read permissions. And this gives us an even clearer picture of what they have access to. So this is Lambda going to this star resource, which is obviously somewhat risky. Again, you have your used and unused permissions here on the right. We're only using 11. There's about 44 that are unused as well. So as we click over here, we're going to go into recommendations, and we'll actually see the policies that CyberArk and CEM provide for you. First thing to do is we'll look at the highest recommendation is these privileges haven't been used in the past 90 days, so these permissions. Let's think about removing those fully, and you can see them all listed here. We can also go into federated identities. So this is a role that they're federating into. This is really key. It shows you the actual end user who's assuming that role and how often they're using it and what activities they're performing, and the permissions too on that they're using when they're in that role. As you can see, there's a ton of permissions. There's about 12,000 on this one role by itself. So really, permission sprawl has become an issue. So if we go to create fix here, what you'll see is the JSONs that we actually recommend that you implement from CyberArk. Now, there's a couple ways you can do that, which we'll get into, but it's giving you the policy that is based on just on the activity that it needs to do its job. If you look at platform management, this is really easy to set up. It's SaaS-based. So if you're going to set up an AWS account, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can do a standalone account. You can add accounts programmatically through APIs, or you can discover organizations and then onboard all the different accounts underneath it. So we're going to click in here. You'll see the information that you would need to put in from the organization name, management ID, location of the cloud trail, and set the right permissions. You'd be able to set this up depending on the size of the organization. It might take an hour to scan, but then you have all your information there. If you want to do it programmatically, there's APIs that you can leverage to set that up so that it goes out and scans and automatically onboards these AWS accounts. And then finally, you can do a single account too. Last couple of things we're going to look at here from a demo standpoint is just the integrations. We've really built out a lot of integrations. This one is around ServiceNow ticketing. What we've seen is a lot of our customers, maybe they have the visibility into the excessive access, but they don't necessarily own that business unit. I think we just went dark here. There we go. But they don't own that business unit, so they need to go ahead and create a ticket, send it off to that group, and then they can remediate it themselves. We also have an integration with Terraform that you just saw, and then we have webhooks to do alerting. So if there's been an increase in your exposure level, or if a new admin or shadow admin account was detected, you can set up a webhook to go out and send that information off. API keys as well to send off information, or if anybody needs to retrieve information from CEM, you can do it that way. The last thing that I wanted to show here is coming up on the screen. It's serverless function. So what we've seen too on the non-human side is that a lot of serverless functions that get set up are over-permissioned. So developers will set them up in a sandbox environment, give them more permissions they potentially need, but then they go into production with those excessive permissions. So what you can do with this capability is scan that code before it goes into prod. We'll create a new policy for you, and then you'll be off to the races when you're in production in a much more secure manner. This is beta. Should go GA in the next couple of weeks here. So if we look at the results, based on the joint effort here between AWS and CyberArk, our customer now has a strong approach to identity to enable them to build a secure multi-account architecture for each team at scale. We've provided isolation at the account level, allowing the teams to migrate safely. We've provided a rapid ability to build an identity and privilege account security model by leveraging Cloud Entitlements Manager and Privilege Cloud. And the financial services companies have successfully migrated much of its infrastructure and the homegrown applications to AWS using EC2 and Lambda and Control Tower. So really, it's a great story and a great combination of how AWS lays down this phenomenal foundation for them to build off of, and then partners like us can come in and add additional features around security when it comes to identity and access management. So with that, I'll go to the call to action slide, turn that back to you, Sandeep.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. One of the aspects that Joe had called out is the tighter integration between CyberArk and Control Tower. And the fact that today customers are looking at creating hundreds of accounts, customers now do not have to be worried that how do we plumb this identity security into our accounts. This integration does that by itself. So if you think Control Tower is a foundation, you would like to build your foundation using Control Tower, you can click on this link and go to the workshop and set up Control Tower, right? The joint integration that's available on Marketplace is available at this link. You can access that and download and deploy it instantly. And every account that you create thereafter will be protected with the CyberArk product and features. Finally, if you're looking at building a comprehensive security and identity strategy in the cloud, check out the Management Governance Cloud Environment Guide, which gives you guidance on how to build a strategy in the cloud, not only from a native AWS service perspective, but also how to use third-party products in your cloud strategy. With that, we'll wrap up a session today. Thank you so much for attending today. While you're at the summit, please do check out the AWS Skill Builder and certifications teams and learn more about AWS. Again, thank you so much for joining today, and we'd love to have you provide feedback for our session. Thank you.
Thank you.